Hi, John McGready here again in the Interview with the Statistician series, and today it's an honor and a privilege to have Dr. Brooke Anderson, who in addition to being a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Biostatistics is creator of software extraordinaire, and many of you may know her in the statistical reasoning class from her creation called Bespoke Homework, which has helped us give review problems of a different type to you. So anyway, we'll get into talking about Bespoke Homework in a little bit, but I want to give you a little bit of background on Brooke. She actually works now at the interface of environmental health and statistics and is working on research with Roger Pang, whose interview you may have seen in a previous edition here. And she came to the world of statistics in kind of an interesting route, and I wanted her to comment on that. She did her undergraduate work in chemical engineering at North Carolina State University, then went to Yale to do a doctorate in environmental engineering, and then has since come to Hopkins to postdoc in the Department of Biostatistics. And so she kind of comes to us at the interface of environmental health, engineering, and statistics. So Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's great to have you here. Before we talk about Bespoke, could you just give us a little insight as to how you ended up in statistics and sort of what the similarities and extra things that come from engineering are as it relates to environmental health?
Yeah, I guess that's an important question, right? So I got all of my undergraduate and graduate degrees in engineering, and I really love a lot of the parts about engineering. I loved the focus on design, and intellectually a lot of the problems are just really interesting. But once I got to graduate school, I found out that most of the research in my department was laboratory bench research. And I had done some of that before, but not kind of all day, every day. And as I started doing that, I realized that I'm just not somebody who enjoys doing bench work. And so I really wasn't sure what to do. I was almost ready to stop, and then the director of my program was absolutely wonderful. And he said, well, why don't you go and try some research with this one person who has a joint appointment here, but whose main focus is more on environmental epidemiology. So I went to a talk she was giving, and I understood, you could understand immediately why what she was doing was important and kind of how she was approaching it, and also that you could do all of that work from a computer desk rather than a lab bench. And so I started working with her, and I've just fallen in love with it.
And so what kind of work was she doing, or what did you work with her on?
Well, she was doing a lot of research on air pollution and human health. And so the project I started with her was looking at temperature and human health, so like heat waves and what mortality rates are, not just for things like heat stroke, but also respiratory outcomes and heart attacks and things like that. So I got started with her, but because of my background, I bring some interesting insights into what I'm doing, but also I don't have as strong of a background in some of the statistics. And so for my postdoc, I really wanted to build that up. And so Roger Ping, who works here, is just a superstar in the area, and fortunately he had a grant that would fund more applied research, so rather than building statistics, applying the models to some of the data he has. So it's been just this great chance for me to come and learn a whole lot, but still do productive work.
Excellent. So we're very glad to have you, of course, for many reasons, and of course notwithstanding this bespoke that I spoke about earlier, that you may be familiar with, and that actually is a good example of how Brooke can apply things to real problems using the freeware out there, and it's not a trivial problem. So I wanted to talk with her a little bit about the inception of this and the mechanics thereof. So Brooke, what was the inspiration behind Bespoke Homework?
Well, I went to a conference. I use R statistical software.
R is a freeware statistical software.
That's right. So I use that for my research, and there's a conference every year that just focuses on that. And really a lot of people are starting to use it. People use it for visualization, people use it in businesses. So it's a great conference because you get all kinds of stuff. One of the people there was a professor, and his main focus is on the education of statistics. And he talks some about this cool thing he does where he writes an exam, but then he randomizes the number by running it through R. And so every student gets the same kinds of questions, but the answers, the numbers, are going to be different for every single question that they get, for every single student, excuse me. And I thought, first of all, that was really cool, and second, man, it would be really cool not just to have every student get a different question, but for students to be able to get the same question over and over again, but not the exact same number, so they can practice something a whole lot of times. So also, when I came here, I was hoping to get some more experience with computer programming and just general familiarity with computers, and so this was a really good project to kind of kind of get my claws into that. So I talked with Roger about it, and he said go ahead, and so we messed around with it some, and we came up with this software.
Excellent, excellent. And so even in our case, where we're focusing on the conceptual and not so much the computational, Brooke has designed it so that we can run through different simulation scenarios, etc., and change the pictures and graphics we get and reorganize the answers, etc., so that you can be constantly drilled about one concept in multiple ways. And that's a really big extension and addition to the course for us, and we're looking forward to expanding its use next year as well. So Brooke, so R is a big component of this, but of course R is sort of a programmer's language. It's not particularly user-friendly. It doesn't allow you to set up forms easily, etc. So you had to build some infrastructure on top of this that wasn't just R-based,
right,
to put it into a web-based framework. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of my goals with this, I think there are a lot of people like me before I started this project who are academics who know a lot of R now, but who don't necessarily know some of the other programming languages you would need to have to set up a web application. So for example, they might not know PHP, they might not know very much about HTML, some of the things like that. So my goal was to set up something where a teacher can go in and can create these problems totally in R and not have to know any of that. And then the function that we did in R pops all those questions that they do right into a framework that's already built.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that'll make it more accessible for people to go in and build this kind of thing, even if they're not savvy with some of the web programming languages.
Excellent, excellent. So we are, like I say, this year in 2012, we were lucky to have the first run of it in statistical reasoning, but it does require a bit of behind-the-scenes work, and Brooke was kind enough to work with me and a student in our department to build it for this course specifically, but it does take a fair amount of time to build, but we hope to increase its involvement in subsequent years. But where do you see this going, Brooke, in terms of like making this more than something we use at Hopkins, you know, which is a big step, I know, but what are you thinking of for the future of Bespoke?
Well, so when you first do a project like this, your focus is totally just on getting it done.
Absolutely.
So that was the first focus, but now that we've got it up and running and working, now I'm realizing the big amount of work to get it to the point where anybody can use it. So we've already got it so that it's pretty easy for other people to write the templates for the questions, so to write the actual content. And we've worked some, I think there are 5 of us now who have written content for that. And so that part's working pretty well. Now I need to go back and make sure it's going to be pretty easy for everybody to put that into the framework using the R functions, and then make sure I explain enough about how to get the final product up on a server. But in the future, I think there's some other really cool things we could do with this. One thing that I think would be really interesting, especially being in the department we're in, where everybody is so wonderful at statistics, I think it would be cool to build some R tools that could take data that you get back from this and analyze it, so that teachers can keep track and see how their students are doing. So right now it doesn't collect very much data at all, but that's certainly a functionality we could build into it. And then again, I think it would be kind of cool for a teacher to be able to go in and use the data from that to say which questions are students really having a hard time with, even see the distribution, like can some students finish this homework set really, really quickly? Is this too easy? Or are there some people who are taking a really long time? Do I need to explain some of this better? So I think that would be one cool thing. Another practical issue is that it would be really cool to be able to put these up online somewhere, some kind of repository, so that when we create a template for one of our sets, that other people could use that. Because the goal is, once we get this all cleaned up and ready to go, we're going to make this open source, so anybody could go on and make a web application using the software that we did. But as you said, there is a lot of work in getting the templates ready, the content for each of the questions. And so you know, in the academic world, a lot of people are very into open source. A lot of people are willing to do that. And so it would be great if we could do it so that you can just go online and pull templates that somebody else has already used and tweak them to suit your course, and then maybe add on a few of your own.
So create like an online users group, community of people around academia, etc. Yeah. And you've actually done, I mean, even though data collection isn't the main focus point yet, you've actually used this in other class contexts to get real-time feedback, right? about
yeah,
to some degree about
to some extent. So we actually in your class you're using it just as practice problems,
right.
So people will have an opportunity to get some extra practice on these different things. But in one of our other tests of it, we used it in a smaller class, and it actually was the first homework for the class.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, it was really nice because the grading was automatic, and so even though it took us time to create the content, we saved time in grading at the end of it. But that collected a lot of data on the students just in terms of the final grades they got. But yeah, I still need to program in some of the collection of specific questions when people are getting specific questions wrong, and how often, how many times they have to answer a question before they get the full credit for it.
Excellent. Well, it's been a great tool for us so far, and I really look forward to learning more about it and using it more extensively in the future. I think it's here to stay, and I'm excited about that. So I'm so glad I got to introduce everyone to Brooke. You've all heard her voice on the how-to video for Bespoke. Now you can see her in person, and you can breathe easier both about your understanding of biostats because of the work she's done with Bespoke, and also breathe easier because of the work she does in environmental health. And thanks for coming out today, Brooke. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.